Hello, everybody. It's May 28th, and my name is Eddie Amin. I am a colleague at the American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C. I'm joining you live from my home. I'm here to present with two distinguished guests, Job Searching During the Pandemic and Beyond. It's part of the APA Staying on Track webinar series. So glad you can join us. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we dive right in. I'd love it if you could ask questions during this webinar using the questions panel in your GoToWebinar dashboard. We've already received a number of questions from pre-registrants, and that has actually given pause to our panelists to incorporate your questions in. So some of them will be answered, but I encourage you to answer all that you have during today's session. We'll get to several of them in about the last 15 minutes of the hour today. You can download the slides as well as two handouts that one of our presenters has provided from the handout section. And of course, whether or not you attended today, you'll see the recording and the slides come out to you later on this afternoon. APA has continually updated, roughly 7 days a week, an information and resource hub related to COVID-19. And you can go to apa.org, and the banner on the top of every page for APA will take you to that resource hub. It can be particularly useful if you're looking for specific psychology-related information. Wanted to let you know that a great tool that could be very useful for you if you've tuned in today is psychcareers.com. That's PSYC careers.com. It's an APA tool that will allow you to search for jobs, upload your resume, and participate in virtual career events. I highly recommend this. If you are about to graduate with your doctorate or just did, congratulations to you. I know this is not the commencement that you were expecting, but APA would like to offer you free membership for the rest of the year at no cost. And there's a link on this slide, which again you can download and follow up with later. I want to give you also a preview to something that we've got in the works. It's the APA Emerging Leaders in Psychology Academy. It will debut sometime later this year. We put a pause on it from its original April launch date because people have a lot going on, but we believe that this is a wonderful opportunity, especially for students and people entering their career to develop some leadership skills in a classroom-based format and then practice those skills in an experiential way. So we've envisioned a 10-seminar series with some really fabulous presenters. apa.org/emerging-leaders. Again, as I mentioned at the opening, this is part of our Staying on Track series. We've got a tremendous amount of recordings available for you from the past 2 months of doing webinars just like this at pages.apa.org/staying-on-track. We are in the process right now of developing our June and July webinars, so you can bookmark that page and come back by next week and you'll see what's coming up next. One of the sessions in particular will be for people that are international and are trying to navigate the visa process. So we've got two really expert presenters joining me today. Dr. Karen Stam, she's the director of APA Center for Workforce Studies, and she's going to share what we currently know about workforce trends, how to think creatively about job prospects, and how in-demand traits and characteristics such as adaptability can help you prepare for psychology jobs. We'll then turn it over to Russ Rondeau. He is the senior partner and chief behavioral scientist at the New Frontier Search Company. He's written a lot, and you can download a few of his articles in the handout section. Russ is going to offer proven ways to secure interviews and get the attention of hiring managers in a crowded and uncertain job market. I believe both of these talks will play nicely with one another. I am your moderator. I oversee the offices for early career psychologists and for graduate students at APA. Really glad again that you could be with us, no matter your career stage. Speaking of career stage, the biggest cohort of you are in your early career, meaning that you just graduated or 0 to 10 years out from graduation. A quarter of you are doctoral students. We're also well represented by people at the undergraduate, master's, mid, and late career levels. This next slide, I think, is really important. So let's just take a minute to look at this. We asked the 2,200 of you that pre-registered to tell us where you are in your current job search status, whether you're thinking about moving jobs in the next 1 to 2 months, the next 3 to 6 months, 6 months from now, whether you're currently underemployed or unemployed, or you're graduating. Naturally, for our students, the bottom 3 rows, the most popular option is that they're graduating and entering the job market. But grayed out to the right of each bar in green are those folks that are indicating to us that they're unemployed and underemployed. The three shades of mustard are readiness or a willingness to enter the job market. So there is still a good number of people that are looking for the next 1 to 2 months and 3 to 6 months from now. And we hope that no matter what stage you're in, you'll be able to take some information from today and begin to apply it. If you are tuning in because you're here to help others, whether they're your clients in clinical service or advisees or colleagues, or you're a parent of a recent grad, we also have information that we think is going to be useful for you to use in your relationships with others. So thanks for telling us about your job search status. And I have an invitation for you on the next slide. So I'll put it in the chat. Stay tuned to the chat. What I invite you to do, if you have a job loss story that you'd like to share with your career monitor on psychology, Sarah Martin, S-Martin, S-M-A-R-T-I-N at apa.org, will look forward to hearing from you. So I'll give you an opportunity to write her if you want to share some of your personal narrative about the recent job market affected by the pandemic. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at APA, Dr. Karen Stam.
Great, thank you so much, Eddie, and I'm very pleased to be here today. Before I get started on my talk, I'm just going to very briefly have my webcam on, but I am going to turn it off again so that we don't hog anybody's bandwidth, and we use the bandwidth to show you the slides and some of the great research that my team and I have done over the past several years. You'll notice that I am talking about what we knew about psychology jobs, in part because there's a lag of about a year or two in some of our workforce research, but also because we've had some difficulties in understanding exactly what's happening up to the moment. If you are unfamiliar with the APA Center for Workforce Studies, our website is apa.org/workforce. And you can find a lot more information than what I'm going to be able to cover today. This includes resources that will help you plan your career, including reports, fact sheets. We have a whole series of great interactive data tools and other projects, other products that can help you gather some of the career information that you need to make informed choices about your pathways going forward. So I always like starting with a couple of key points. And if there is one point that I want everybody to walk away from today, it is this. It is focus on your skills. You will hear me talk more about skills rather than having a degree, because when you're on the job market, what many employers are actually looking for is the things you can do and the demonstrated experience of how you actually have those skills. I also want to provide some information that will help you expand the ways that you think about your education in psychology, as well as the experiences that you have along the way. So, and it's important to keep in mind that your education and experiences can be used in a lot of very versatile ways. I'm going to try to highlight some of those less common pathways and outcomes. And it's also important to keep in mind that what you train to do in your educational programs is not necessarily what you do on a day-to-day basis. What I'm not going to do today is provide a lot of specific recommendations or places to look for jobs or specific job prospects, in part because there's a lot of uncertainty in the job market right now and for the foreseeable future, but also in part because these decisions are very individualized. and there's a lot of contextual factors that must be taken into consideration. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. And having said that, what I am going to do today is give you some research that'll help inform some of your thinking around this and some general strategies that you can incorporate into your job search. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, I don't necessarily have a crystal ball, and that's because making predictions about what is going to happen in the future is very difficult. Projections are not necessarily predictions. They're not definitive statements about what will happen in the future. However, they are based on what we know about has been happening in the past, and they're very often based on the available data. What I'm going to go through today is some of what we knew about psychology degrees. A large part of the beginning of this talk comes from our Degrees in Psychology data tool, which you can find in the slides, or just go to our web page and then find the data tools link on the side. I'm going to focus mostly on graduate degrees in psychology, but in this data tool, there's also some complementary information for bachelor's degree holders. So if you are interested in that information, I would encourage you to take a look at that tool. I'm going to show you some of the top occupations for psychology degree holders, as well as some of the lesser common occupations, and then we'll go into skills and trades. And these are mostly based for jobs at the doctoral level, but I think some of the same principles apply to other places. Here's your chance for a little bit of a pop quiz just to do on your own before we go any further. How many psychology doctorate holders work in the occupations of either psychologists or psychology professors? And this is somewhat of a trick question because APA would consider anyone who has a psychology doctorate to be a psychologist. This is a little bit different because we're looking at occupations. So just play along with me for a moment. Is it A, 1 in 10, B, 1 in 5, C, 1 in 3, or D, 1 in 2? Give yourself a moment to think about what do you think is your answer? So let's show what the answer to this question actually is. It is D. It is 1 in 2. So this means that approximately half of people who have a psychology doctorate are either a psychologist by occupation or a psychology professor. On the flip side, this means that half are not in these occupations. And what we'll look at in the next slide is some of the variety of occupations that these psychology degree holders actually hold. This is showing us some of the more common occupations for psychology degree holders. Here, the relative size of the font shows sort of the overall numbers of the people who are employed in each one of these occupations. These data came from the National Science Foundation, so they're a little bit more geared towards some of the science and engineering workforce, and there's a couple different occupational categories, which is represented by the different color text. In the interactive version of this that resides on our website, if you were to hold your mouse over any one of these occupations, or if you were on a mobile device and you tapped on any of them, it would pop up with a box that gives you the actual numbers and a little bit more additional information. So I would encourage you to explore that tool on your own at a later time to drill down a little bit further. So as you can see, what I highlighted on the pop quiz was that psychologists right in the center and post-secondary teachers of psychology, which is the psychology professor category, are the two most common occupations. You can also see a very wide spread of other types of occupations. NSF looks at a number of about 130 different occupational categories, and psychology doctorate holders are found in over 60 of them. A couple things that I think are worth highlighting here are the number of occupations that have some kind of administration or management category. So if you look on your left-hand side, you see top-level managers, execs, and admins. There's a couple others. There's management-related occupations, which is towards the right of psychologists. There's education administrators, which is sort of on the lower right-hand corner, which is kind of small. And there's a couple other managers categories. There's one medical and health services managers in orange, sort of on the lower left-hand side. All of these are jobs that people who have a background in psychology could be using some of their leadership or management experience. And we'll see where that falls in terms of some of the top skills in an upcoming slide. There's also a number of other post-secondary teacher categories, which would be basically university and college professors. If you took all of these together and combined them, they would actually be the third most common occupation. If you see right below where it says psychologists, post-secondary teachers of education is one of the larger categories. We actually suspect this is largely counseling psychology professors, in part because those programs are often located within schools or departments of counseling rather, or schools or departments of education rather than schools or departments of psychology. Even if you take that category out, there are still a number of other post-secondary teacher categories, including math and statistics right on top in the center, political science, other social sciences, other natural sciences, business, commerce, and marketing. So it shows some of the versatility of backgrounds in psychology, and that psychology is often referred to as a hub science. What this means is that it connects to a lot of other areas of other fields. Some of the areas I highlighted just now include some of those fields. So that might be a strategy if you're trying to expand your job search, that these jobs might not necessarily be just in psychology departments. They could be elsewhere. One of the best examples that I had recently was someone who asked about accountants. And believe it or not, it's a little bit hard to see on the slides, but it is actually there. It's in that below post-secondary teachers in psychology on the lower right-hand corner, and above education administrators, which is a very small category. It is there, so not large numbers, but it was large enough that it did actually show up in these data. Another one that I personally think is interesting because it's relevant to some of my background is statisticians, which is up on the on the upper right-hand corner in gray. This is another area where there's a fairly large number of people who have backgrounds in psychology who do actually work in these kinds of occupations. Now, I highlight both of these examples, not because I want to encourage everybody to become accountants or to become statisticians, but these are examples of the expansive thinking about the types of jobs that are available to people who have psychology backgrounds, because it ties in with the skills and the things that we know how to do. So moving on to our next slide, just to summarize some of our key occupations on the top occupations: psychologists, psychology professor, counselors, and a couple other management positions are amongst some of the top occupations. And another key finding is that despite the fact that a large number of people are employed outside of those occupations of psychologist or psychology professor, about 97% of psychology doctorate holders say their jobs are closely or somewhat related to psychology. Even when some of these less common occupations are the pathway that people follow, there still is a high degree of how psychology is related to that job. So that's a very important finding. This is also a similar percentage of doctorate holders overall in all other fields who say that their job is closely or somewhat related to the field of their degree. So that's an encouraging finding. Now, moving on to what we know about master's degree occupations. These patterns look a little bit different than they did for doctorate holders, and it's mainly because some of the top occupations here are in the practitioner sector, including counselors, psychologists by occupation, but not by licensure status, and social workers. Here too, you can see some of the management and administrative roles popping up. There are actually a number of other health practitioners that are some of the more common occupations. Teachers, but not necessarily at the college level, so those are all key findings. If you look right above counselors, personnel, training, and labor relations specialists, these are most likely industrial or organizational psychologists. So again, here, a large number of occupations are available to people who have backgrounds in psychology. When we look at those approximately 130 different occupational categories, psychology master's degree holders are found in about 75 of them. And just to summarize again what we know about psychology master's degree holders, again, some of the top occupations are in the practitioners, including counselors, psychologists by occupation, but not necessarily licensure status, social work, teachers, and personnel and training and labor relations specialists. Now, the percentage of psychology master's degree holders who say their jobs are closely or somewhat related to psychology is a little bit lower than it was for doctorate holders, but not by much. About 89% of psychology master's degree holders say their jobs are closely or somewhat related to psychology, and this is also similar to master's degree holders in other fields. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, I didn't have time today to show complementary data for bachelor's degree holders, but if you are interested in that, that's available in the data tool on our website, and I would encourage you to take a look. There's additional employment characteristics too, like work activity and work sector that I didn't have the chance to look at today, but they are available up in our data tool. So now we'll move on to talking about some of the skills and traits that we know are used in psychology jobs. This set of analysis is using a slightly different data source. It came from all of the jobs that were posted in APA Psych Careers, which Eddie mentioned in the beginning. That's APA's job board, and we looked at all the jobs that were posted in Psych Careers over a 3-year period from 2015 to 2017. Now here is where I think there's some particularly encouraging news. The top skills across many types of psychology jobs are leadership, communication, and teamwork. Despite a lot of the uncertainty about what the future of the workforce is going to look like, I don't see any indications that these skills are going to change. I still see them as being very important for some of the jobs that we will all be doing in the future. If you're unfamiliar with these kinds of radar plots, it actually helps you to see both the similarities and the differences across different categories at the same time. So the areas that I just highlighted, such as leadership, teamwork, and communication skills, those are ones where across many different job types, which you can see on the right-hand side, are kind of similar in a lot of ways. Where you see the shapes kind of pulling out in different ways, that's showing you where some types of skills have a different importance than other types of skills in various types of jobs. So for researchers, which is that bluish gray line, analytic skills, not surprisingly, would be important because many researchers are involved in data analysis or research methods or those kinds of activities, and that would make sense. An interesting finding when it comes to faculty is that it was the only job type where cultural awareness was mentioned in many psychology job ads. I think this is worth a little bit more consideration in terms of why exactly is that happening. We do suspect that it may be due to the requirements for diversity statements in many faculty jobs, but it could also be due to, for APA accredited programs, that they also have requirements for diversity, and those requirements may be specified in some way in the job advertisements. One skill that actually didn't show up in terms of the top 5 skills, which might be kind of surprising, is critical thinking. And we suspect that this may be a skill that is kind of hiding in plain sight, or that it may be an assumed characteristic of these jobs. And there was not necessarily any reason to put any language specifically about critical thinking in job ads. It's also important to keep in mind that the majority of jobs that are listed in APA Psych Careers are for either faculty or health service psychologist or practitioner positions, all at the doctoral level, and that may be playing into it, that it's sort of an assumed quality of the people who would be holding these jobs, and it may not necessarily have to be explicitly mentioned in the job ads. So next, let's move on to looking at some of the top traits. And adaptability was one of the traits that popped up as being mentioned in many different job ads across the various types of positions that we looked at. Now, there's a lot of good news here, because if you think about what we are all doing right now in terms of very rapidly shifting the way that we do basically everything, this bodes well for people who have backgrounds in psychology. I want everyone to make sure you give yourself credit for learning new ways of engaging in your work, whether that work is through telehealth or telepsychology, whether it's engaging in distance learning, whether it's finding new ways to do your research or potentially different topics, whether it's what we're doing right now in terms of learning through a webinar rather than learning through a seminar or some kind of workshop or training experience. All of that is a giant exercise in adaptability. And I'm sure there are some lessons that you've learned about what's working and what's not working. But I'm sure there's also many different ways that your skills are being applied in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Another thing too to think about in terms of adaptability is transferable skills. Some of what we're doing in terms of multiple platforms does actually translate across different systems. If you think about maybe just let's take virtual meetings, for example. There's many options out there, and I would bet if you all are like me, I've had to deal with multiple different platforms, and they're all kind of similar, but not quite. Being able to move easily from one system to another, that's an example of a transferable skill. I'm sure if you sat down to do some self-reflection, you could think of additional ways that, additional examples. And moving on to our next slide, this is kind of going back to one of my key points in the beginning of this webinar. What you train to do is not necessarily what you do on a day-to-day basis. This pile of spaghetti demonstrates that. This is coming from, again, a different type of analysis and a different data source. We analyzed interviews from the How Did You Get That Job series, which is a small group of jobs, mostly some of the lesser common areas. And we looked at what area did people train in, which you see on the left-hand side. What area are people actually working in terms of their subfields? You see a lot of crossover. Some of this is kind of intentional because if you notice the alphabetical order is flipped on both sides. So you see maybe a little bit more crossover than you would normally. But you do see this tangled pile of spaghetti. It is not necessarily one-to-one correspondence of if you train in a certain field that you actually end up working in another field. We're going to highlight just one example on the next slide to see this pattern a little bit easier. We picked, again, much like the examples I highlighted earlier about accountants and statisticians, I'm highlighting counseling psychology here, not for any particular reason other than it was one of the larger degree or training subfields, so it gave us a little bit more to see. But not everybody who trained in counseling psychology ended up working in counseling psychology. There's a very widespread of working subfields. And just to wrap up on a couple of actionable points to focus on, like I mentioned in the very beginning, skills, 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 especially the transferable skills where you have examples of how you've learned a skill in one situation or one environment and may have been able to transfer or use that in a different way going forward. Teamwork, communication, and leadership are some of the skills that we've seen as being important in psychology jobs, and I would hazard a guess that these skills will be continued to be important in the future. And you may wonder if you're a student or an early career professional about leadership. I would also include leadership potential as a skill that you may not have had the full opportunities given where you are in your career to actually engage in some of these experiences, but you may have things where you've been on the path of gaining leadership experience. For example, have you mentored an undergraduate student or another grad student or a postdoc or a, just even somebody that you work with? Have you taken on leadership opportunities through maybe your organization or through your student government? These may not necessarily be related to your education or your work experience per se, but it could show the potential in those regards. I think that some of the skills of the future are things like adaptability, flexibility, and learning. And the good news here, like I mentioned earlier, is that all of these have a strong grounding in psychology. I think our discipline in particular is positioned well to adapt going forward. A couple areas where I think there might be some areas to look into in the future are the role of technology, as we've all had to shift from what we have done in person in the past to learn new ways of doing our work. I think that will continue to be important. So highlighting any experience you have with using, learning, continuing to learn about technology, whether that is through telehealth or telepsychology, whether it's engaged on both sides of learning and teaching, or whether it's just things like how do you manage a team in a virtual environment. I think all of those will be important going forward. I do think there might be some opportunities for applied psychology. This is the area that takes or uses psychology to solve real world problems. This can involve things like looking at some of the effects of social isolation or some of the psychosocial implications of being in quarantine. A lot of the questions that we have that we're experiencing now, they don't actually have a lot of research, or they could be built on existing research that needs to be taken a step further. For example, what are best practices in telehealth? What are effective strategies for both teaching and for learning in a remote environment? How do teams function virtually? All of these have some grounding in psychology and could be used to actually address those problems. And finally, I think there might be some opportunities to address equity issues. The shift to technology has created a digital divide that probably already existed and is now growing even wider. Might be some areas to address health disparities or educational disparities or any other areas where certain groups are disadvantaged. So if you can adapt and harness the opportunities there, that might be where some of the jobs are. And finally, just some concluding thoughts about how to think creatively for job options. I do hope that some of the foundation of the research from the Center for Workforce Studies does actually help to be more expansive about this. Think beyond job titles, occupations, industries, and employers. And if you're lucky enough to be able to move, think beyond certain geographic areas. The wider you can cast your net, the better job prospects you will have. There is an element of being self-reflective and knowing yourself well enough to know what kinds of skills you have, what skills you need, and how, if they match, great. If they don't, what kind of opportunities do you have to gain those skills? One source I really like is the ONET job profiles. This is a large occupational database where you can look up by skills, you can find similar occupations, and that might also give you some ideas. And finally, plan but adapt is one of my mantras, and I think it's certainly true now. Like we saw with some of the degree of relatedness of people's jobs to the degree of to the area of their degree, there's some encouraging signs there that even if you're, even if you fall into one of these less common occupational categories, people are still finding meaningful employment. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Russ for our next section.
Good morning, good afternoon, America. Hello, everybody. Great to be part of this program. Karen, thanks a lot. Some great information there to get us thinking. Hello, all my fellow psychologists, graduates, studiers of the mind. I want to take a different perspective to feed off of Karen's insight. She gave you some great ideas around how the marketplace is, how and what it looks like. Let's take it from a different perspective. Let's take it from the capitalist perspective. And I want to share some good information with you on how you can take your job search and secure some interviews to get it to the next level. Fair enough? So I'm going to give you some ideas here that may be contradictory to what you've heard from parents, spouses, significant others, family members, Uncle Frank, who knows everything. And I'm going to share these ideas with you because I have been a psychologist. I've been a psychologist since 2004. I've been a headhunter since 1985. I live in the world of performance, pay for performance. I haven't had a salary since 1985. Everything I do is commission-based executive search work. I do it on a retainer. The reason I say that is is that the ideas that I'm going to give you here about how to find a job, how to get a great job, are based on thousands and thousands of pieces of data that I've learned from 35 years in helping people get jobs and secure the best jobs as opposed to just a job. So I want you to think of it this way. How much money do you want to make? $50 an hour? You want to make $100,000 a year, $75,000 a year, $50,000 a year? Write down on your notes, how much money do you want to make? Because that's going to be relevant to how you go about pursuing a job or replacing your job. Because in the world of capitalism, your value to the marketplace is predicated on what you bring to the marketplace. And we can talk about theory, we can talk about how to use applied psychology like Karen talked about, but what does it look like? What does your job look like? Could you describe what you want your day to be? What does it look like? What are you going to eat? Where are you going to sit? Who are you going to talk to? What's your boss going to ask you to do? What is your day going to look like? I want you to be thinking about that as we talk about this, because if you can't present your skills and what you envision your job to be, if you can't present it in a way that people can understand it and appreciate it and monetize it, you're not going to get the job you want. You'll find a job. We're all smart. We'll find a job, but you won't get the job you want. And the pandemic will pass, but there will be some residue. There will be some tension left over as this pandemic passes. And you want to be thinking about how can I, in essence, how can I reinvent myself? So think of some things this way as we have some questions here. Stay with me. What could I do? What if I could invent my own job as a psychologist in the business or the private practice? What would it look like in a company? And how could I prove my salary would make or save that company money? Sure, you can apply for jobs online. You can look in the magazines, in the Monitor, and the newspapers, and LinkedIn, and Indeed. You can look for jobs that are posted. That's great. Go ahead and apply for them. Do the research and apply. But you can also think about, what do I have in my skill sets? What kind of creativity, what kind of ideas, what kind of value do I have that I could go to an organization and say, put me on as the resident psychologist or the resident chief research officer. I will do research and create value. Pay me $75,000 a year to start as a psychologist, as one example. Pay me 75 grand a year, and I will deliver information and data and help you design better systems around the HR or employment issues that will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in value. How do I do that? By improving workflow, by improving the culture, by finding data on how better to teach or train employees, which will reduce turnover, reduce workplace stress, improve morale, build better teams, improve customer satisfaction. And if you can prove that the research that you have and the ideas that you have will add that value, they will hire you very, very quickly. So be thinking about that. Number two, train yourself never again to say, go into an interview and say, give me a chance to prove myself. This is the world of capitalism. Yes, we are psychologists and we have a code of ethics from the APA. We are here to help people. We're here to help people the best way we can. And on the other side, we have to respond to the capitalist mindset that says they don't owe you a chance. Business owners don't owe us anything. We have to prove our value. So if you say, give me a chance to prove myself, if you've not done anything to prove that you've already started to research and prepare and document the information that you want to share, you won't get the interview. You won't get the job. We have to learn and we have to earn the chance with the evidence of our smart work and research. So start to think about what you have done in your past, in your school workloads, that can be transferred over. No one owes you an interview. If you say, give me a chance to prove myself, and you haven't done anything, it's not going to go anywhere, I guarantee you. Number 3, gathering evidence. Start to gather evidence. What options, interests, success stories, income requirements do you need? Capitalism is what pays your salary. We have to be able to show them the value. Okay? You have to prove, you and I have to prove we've done the heavy lifting before we get to that interview. Number 4, this is interesting. Within the pandemic, within workplace morale, whatever the case may be, if you're looking at corporate jobs or counseling, coaching, academics, whatever the case may be, what are the weak links in workplace productivity that have shown their vulnerability, that have shown more risk during this pandemic? And can you create activities or identify research and ideas to fix these issues in the post-pandemic world? For example, people are working from home. Most of us are not designed to work from home. We don't have the disciplines, we're social creatures, we need to get out to Jimmy John's, we want to run to Starbucks, we want to prairie dog and stick our head over and talk to Sarah and Frank about something. We don't like social isolation. That's why people are willing to take a chance and go to a bar or go to a restaurant just to be around people. So have you found weak links in the business chain that maybe you can create value that says, if it happens again, this is what we do? Or can you find ways to adapt social isolation and workplace productivity in a different way? It's a way to think about it. Find the weak link and solve that problem. Number 5, document every project, every case that since you've been in preschool to prove that you have a record of doing things productivity and you're proactive. It doesn't matter what you say you want to do. You can say, well, Mr. Smith, I want to do this. And great, want is something. I hope to do this. Hope is not a strategy. Uncle Frank sometimes said, even though he didn't say much else. Hope is not a strategy. So what can you do to prove that you are making the job change effectively? Number 6, creating a file, create a paper trail. Show that you've done your research. Show what you're interested in. Find the common challenges, the needs, the issues of that industry to show how you're different from other people sending resumes and hoping for a call. In essence, it goes back to, what do you want to do? Can you describe what your job looks like? And then, can you identify companies, or can you identify industries or professional organizations that have the same cultural needs, the same energy, the same perspective as you do, that you can start to create a job pattern of research and data to move forward. Lucia, can you move to the next slide? Thanks. Can you create, so let's go to a sec now, let's shift to some other more visible marketing ideas here. LinkedIn. What does your LinkedIn profile look like? Well, Russ, I don't use LinkedIn. Wrong answer. Start to use LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile that has been abandoned, LinkedIn is the best free social platform on the planet for you to demonstrate and to showcase who you are, what you look like, and how good you are. Every employer that you apply for a job is going to look at your resume, and they're going to go right to your LinkedIn profile and look at your mugshot. Oh, you don't have a picture. How come? Get your picture up there. Get your credentials up there. Get a decent profile, because your LinkedIn profile will prove to the world who you are. And if you remember the old Brad Paisley country song, I look so much better online. You have to look good online in a pandemic. Why? Because people don't have a chance to sit down and just talk with you. We're social creatures. We like to ask questions as psychologists. We are that kind of individual. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile has content and looks like who you are. And if you're pursuing a job in a certain field, make sure that the language in your email, in your LinkedIn profile, make sure that your summary of who you are, make sure that that summary, make sure that your content mirrors, echoes, resembles, looks like, sounds like, smells like the industry that you are trying to get into. So what I'm saying is your LinkedIn profile can change on a monthly basis, or if you're pursuing a field of interest in whatever, make sure that your LinkedIn profile has the same kind of words and phrasing and ideas that you need to demonstrate in that industry. So in essence, you sound like you're part of their tribe, right? You want to sound and make it look like you already belong working there, as opposed to, I really want to get into that industry. It's great that you're curious, but can you prove that you are as compelling as someone else that you're competing with? Number 8, calling, emailing every hiring manager on the planet, talent acquisition, to share your value as a proactive professional. Start to look at other professionals like you on LinkedIn, what people are doing jobs that you want to do. Look at where they worked. Look at their trail of job history. What clues are they giving you? Where did they work before they got the job that you want? What did they do? What do they sound like? What do they look like? What kind of research did they do? What kind of groups did they belong to? Or what kind of groups in LinkedIn do they belong to? Because those groups in LinkedIn are one of your biggest keys to finding job availability and also understanding the trends of a specific industry. So if you want to get into applied psychology, like Karen said, well, start to find companies that you believe or you find use applied psychology and see if you can present a case for why you should work there or what you could do. How do you find those jobs? That's up to you. You have to do the research. That's where joining the groups and being active on LinkedIn will help you understand how the business world is seeing us as a psychologist, as it were, okay? So that's very, very important, is follow the trail. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here, is follow the other employers, who they hire and why they hire them. Number 10, start to look like a trend, a leader, an expert. Start to write articles, start to put posts out on LinkedIn so that you start to stand out as a value-added contributor to the psychology community. You start posting articles and you start writing simple articles on whatever it is. And if you're not a good writer, find another co-author, and that way you double your marketing efforts as well, okay? Start to write and post ideas on LinkedIn to show that you are better or more advanced than the other 90% of people that you are applying for that same job. If you're a published author, people look at you differently. If you take a look at my Russ Riendo profile on LinkedIn, LinkedIn says I'm an all-star status. It's because I'm using all parts of the cow on LinkedIn to move forward, okay? Make sure you use LinkedIn. Number 11, we're almost done. Tweak your resume and your online presence, but your resume, make sure that your resume looks like and is as strong as your LinkedIn profile. Your resume has to show specific contributions. Don't just talk about what you did, talk about how well you did it and where your value was. And our last note here is, what examples can you show of your research as you're preparing your job order? When you apply for a job, top of your resume, I would encourage you to put an objective that says seeking a job in applied psychology or as a psychologist in a specific industry, whatever that job is that you're posting. Make sure that your resume has content that people will read with purpose and is relative to that job. And I believe, Eddie, we are right at the 17-minute mark, 18-minute mark. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Stay tuned. We're going to do a Q&A, and I hope this helps.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. At this point, if Karen and Russ, if you'd like to show your webcams, and Lucia, our wonderful organizer in the background, Dr. Lucia Gutierrez, thank you for being a part of all of our webinar series so far. We can actually turn off the slides and just do the webcams for now. These talks were fantastic. A lot of really positive feedback and a lot of questions, of course, in the chat box. So I'm going to try to get to them. Let's start out with a tough love one, perhaps, to borrow from Russ's language. Somebody wrote, and I'll paraphrase, many of us are sitting here wondering, okay, this is all really good information, but do I honestly have a chance of getting a job? What are my job prospects? And I know that this might differ based on kind of job one is looking for, and a lot of it is best guess at this point, but do you have anything that you can share to people wondering specifically about their job prospects?
Yeah. Eddie, you want me to comment on that?
You feel free to volley.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great question. Before the pandemic, we had almost zero unemployment, right? It was like 3.2%, whatever. There are millions of jobs out there available. You will find a new job. The pandemic, the unemployment for pandemic has affected a lot of the hospitality, a lot of the lower level, less management leadership roles. So there are millions of jobs available, thousands of jobs available for psychologists. And the key there is continue to look at your value proposition. I guarantee you there's jobs out there.
Thanks, Karen. Karen, if you, and now and at any point in the future, you're both welcome to just join in as you'd like. Is there any advice that you'd give differently now that you wouldn't have in January or February?
I was thinking about that in preparing my talk, and my emphasis on skills is exactly the same today as it would have been several months ago. Demonstrating what you can do, as well as having a good assessment of your own skills and what you're good at, and the experiences that actually show that you can do those things. And then looking very carefully at job qualifications, duties, and responsibilities to find the types of jobs that do match those skills.
And I would, to follow up on Karen's comments, I wrote down 4 things I think that are different now than maybe in January that are important. One is make sure your vocabulary is as compelling for that industry as you want. Make sure that you are speaking the language of the industry that you're pursuing. Number 2 is make sure your writing skills are as crisp and direct and as strong as they can be, because you have to look good online. It's great if you can meet face to face, not going to happen. So you have to look good online. Number 3 is make sure you have proof and you have it displayed in a infographic way or a visual way, like Karen had some great slides to show the value in what you've been doing. And number 4 is, what have you been doing in this pandemic to prepare yourself for a new job? Have you been sitting and binging Tiger King? It's pretty cool. And it's a lot of fun, but that's a whole nother seminar in a weird way. But what have you been doing to enhance your skill sets and productivity? Because people are going to ask you that.
Thanks. And I won't talk about Tiger King this hour.
Yeah, it's another time.
A couple of questions came from people that are in their mid or late career stages, finding potentially some ageism, some barriers to landing a new career. Is there any advice that is specific to people that are in this boat?
Karen, you want me to comment on that?
Sure, that would be great.
For those of us that are a little bit older and grayer hair, is one of the challenges for as we get older is people believe our skills have atrophied. We're not in touch with technology. What's Zoom? What's people still think we have flip phones. We have to make sure that we can prove that we have the credibility and our skill sets, our technology skills are up to date. So make sure that you're able to prove and demonstrate that you have relative current experience, that you can communicate on this new virtual platform. I think that's one real important one. And also being flexible is you may not be able to secure the salary that you got before. You may not be able to secure the flexibility that you had before because of ageism, whatever the case may be. But you have to be realistic in saying it may not be like the good old days, whatever those were, but being flexible.
I've also seen some research recently that people who have more advanced degrees are the ones who are more likely to change jobs within the last month or so. So that also bodes well that the jobs are out there and people are actually securing employment.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Thank you. A couple of questions I think that might tie together. Because the job market could be tougher, especially for people in communities where there are just not as many job prospects, perhaps compared to urban centers. This could cause people to take a job with a salary that does not reflect their experience, their skills. It could also potentially cause people to find a job that at an organization that doesn't align with their values. And do you have any suggestions for people who might feel as if they're the underdog or fewer options to choose from, perhaps finding an organization that does align with their values, perhaps related to diversity inclusion, perhaps a salary that they feel is more in line with what they bring to the table?
For me as a longtime executive recruiter, what I can tell you is when people feel like the underdog, many times the people feel like the underdog is because they believe they are the underdog because they haven't done enough of the heavy lifting to be prepared for that job. So your salary is going to be commensurate with what that company believes you have value to the marketplace. So the more research you can do on understanding what the issues are of that job, the issues of that industry, that culture, is going to give you more leverage to negotiate yourself a better salary. So it's all in the preparation. Again, it goes in the preparation and the hard work of what you do to prepare for that particular job. I don't know if Karen, if you had some insight on that.
Yeah, and just one point about negotiation that I think women in particular don't know. Under most circumstances, you should negotiate for salaries, and women do not do this, which means you could potentially be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table over the course of your career. You have to do it respectfully. In most circumstances, it does not result in the loss of a job offer. So you do need to be aware that there is sometimes some sensitivity, but there's usually very little harm in at least asking. Sometimes there is no flexibility with a salary offer, but very often the employer does expect you to negotiate. So
right.
I encourage you to at least, is there some wiggle room in the salary offer is one strategy that might work.
And to Karen's point, Eddie, when you're negotiating salary, if someone one is don't accept or decline an offer until you get a written offer. Make sure you see a physical email or offer letter that says this offer, the salary is $51,000. Pick a number.
Mm-hmm.
Get it in writing first, because once a company has put the offer in writing, they're emotionally committed and they don't want this to go away. They believe the deal's done, right? They've emotionally closed that. So when you negotiate on a salary, let's say you want more money, if you want, let's say the offer is 51 and you want 61, you're not arguing to to get 61,000. What you're arguing for is $10,000 more. So when you negotiate that, you have to say to yourself, how can I make the argument that I'm worth $10,000 more an hour or a year? $10,000 a year is $800 a month, is $200 a week, is what's 7 into 8, $200 a week, $50 a day, whatever. Is reduce it to ridiculous and say, are you worth whatever $200 a week is, $50 a day? Make that arguments instead of 61. But if you can say, hey, I'm worth another $50 an hour, don't you think? Well, yeah, or a day? Yes, of course. Make sure you have a compelling reason why you want that number. Otherwise, they just say, well, it's nice that you hope that you get that, but that's not going to happen, right? Always have a good angle of attack.
Thanks. I have one question quickly for each of you. Karen, there were some questions about the terminology that you were using when you were describing some of the data. For example, a practicing psychologist or a professional psychologist, a psychologist writ large. Do you have any? Should people go to the website to get more into the weeds about the definitions used to sort the data?
Yes, and some of it is because it wasn't data that we collected ourselves. So actually that psychologist occupation includes all types of psychologists. It is heavily geared towards practitioners, but not exclusively. It would include IO psychologists and other types of psychologists as well. But from what we've done with some of our additional research, we do think it's mostly practitioners. But good points. The terms we don't even use them consistently sometimes. And your best guess is to try to look at some of the more specific details.
Thanks. And I will leave this last question with Russ. There's anxiety always when putting oneself out there for a new job, and it might be more pronounced now. Do you have any words of wisdom to help people deal with the perhaps additional layer of anxiety that could come with entering the market?
If you're not nervous, if you're not stressed out about trying to find a job in this market, you would probably be from another planet. So I think for all of us, it's perfectly normal, logical, and healthy to be a little stressed, to be a little anxious about trying to find a job in this marketplace. What I would encourage people to consider is this too shall pass. You have your energy and your intellect to be able to pursue anything you want right now. So think of it as Me Inc. Everything you do, don't think about I'm going to work for an employer because I can get benefits. Think of it from an independent perspective. You can only control what you can control. So by putting your energy into researching the industry, studying your craft, writing good letters, that will increase the odds of you finding a new job, because you can only control what you can control. So do things and focus your positivity and your energy on those opportunities, and that's going to give you a better chance of getting a job. But trust me, I've been doing this as recruiting 35 years. There are thousands of jobs available. It just takes hard work to find them and being creative. I guarantee you'll find a job.
Thanks. And I want to encourage everybody to use the links that come from the slides to begin searching, whether you're at the very early stages and wondering what kind of careers are out there in psychology, or you're trying to get down into this very specifics about job potential in your specific market or region. With that, thank you everybody for joining, for staying a couple of minutes late. Dr. Sand and Dr. Rondeau, appreciative of your expertise. I encourage people to also consider APA Convention, APA.org/convention. It's going to be virtual this year, and there will be a virtual career fair, which we maybe hope to feature similar experts like that you've provided us today. So we'll see you in August, and everybody take good care. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.